Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. This week, we visit technology's leading edge. In the second half of our show, we catch up with Brandon Johnson, whose company, Boston Microfluidics, may have solved the single-drop blood test problem threatening to ground high-flying Silicon Valley unicorn Theranos. Up first, we're pleased to welcome Charles Barr, founder and president of Webpass, a San Francisco-based broadband wireless internet company muscling in on Comcast turf here in Boston. Charles, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here.
Charles, I asked you on for two reasons. Back in 1997, when I first started as a venture capital investor, I backed two companies that tried to provide gigabit internet service pretty much the same way your company, Webpass, is doing it today. They got the technology to work, but the market wasn't ready, and both companies crashed and burned after the dot-com bubble burst. Here we are almost 20 years later, and by a twist of fate, I just became one of the very first Webpass customers in Boston. I'm over the moon. I couldn't be happier to see this technology come to life. You launched Webpass back when we were still performing funeral rites for Triton and Cavill, our two portfolio companies. Given the fact that memories of the tech crash were still fresh in 2003, what attracted you to the business?
Well, I was living the tech crash in 2003, and I needed to eat. Really was why I started the business. So back in 2002 and 2003, I was really good at getting jobs, but I wasn't necessarily good at keeping jobs. So over those 2 years, I had 8, 9 jobs.
Oh boy.
It was very frustrating. I would get a great job. I would be there for 2 months, and then some disaster would happen. The company would fold. All the positions would be outsourced. The company would merge. Any possible outcome of a company closing, I went through in those 2 years, and it was very frustrating. So you were in and out of work constantly. And that's kind of where the genesis for Webpass came from, is I didn't want to have that as my experience. And I live in San Francisco. And San Francisco is a very expensive town. So if you're going to choose to live here and you're going to pay the rents that are required to live here, you might as well create a business that forces you to be local.
So necessity was the mother of invention for you.
Precisely. That's exactly how we came to it. My professional background was I was a network administrator. So I was the guy that would be in your office and would make your email work and make sure that you could surf the web and that all your network connections were A-OK and happy. But I had never worked in an ISP before.
An internet service provider.
When I was looking around for something that I could do, there was 3 questions I was trying to answer. The first one was, I wanted a business that I could run that forced me to be local. And by creating an ISP that relies on condos and local buildings, that forced me to stay local. Second thing I wanted something that had recurring revenue, because I'm not a natural-born salesman, and I was very nervous at starting at 0 every month. So I wanted something that I could slowly build and would get bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So recurring revenue was key. And the third thing I wanted was something I knew how to do. I was a network administrator by trade. I had never worked on an internet company, but that's just on the other side of the firewall. The technology is the same. So those 3 thoughts kind of coalesced into Webpass.
Well, let's start from the bottom and build a picture of your network. We were using what was then cutting-edge 18 gigahertz technology. Millimeter wave wireless has come a long way in the past 20 years. And without getting too wonky, tell us about the network gear you use.
So the network is all Ethernet. We run a 100% Ethernet network. So in your home, you get a Cat5 Ethernet jack. There's no modem. You just plug in what you want to plug in, and away you go. From there, as you work from the customer's unit back to our network, it's all Ethernet inside the building. That could be fiber optic Ethernet, Cat5, Cat6 cable. And then it goes to the roof. And on the roof, we have an Ethernet bridge, which is a wireless device. One wireless device talking to another. And that's a key point in our network because those are capital expenses, but not recurring expenses.
And you get that equipment from a vendor in Israel?
Right now, most of our stuff comes from a vendor called Siklu. There's 2 radio manufacturers we buy at the moment, Siklu and SAF. They're the best in the market by far. But our network is over 10 years old, and so we have equipment that goes way back from all sorts of vendors.
Now, these radios don't have really long ranges. They go, a mile or so. How do you build a citywide network out of that?
Well, that's why we focus on the urban core, and that's why we exclude suburbia and rural areas. We focus on downtown cities with a dynamic reinvigoration of the urban core. That's where we do really well. The population in those centers are open to trying new things. They're short distances. It has to be urban. And typically the buildings have a lot of customers in them. So it is a short distance, but it goes building to building to building. And I should add, in San Francisco, we also deploy fiber. So we also have the ability to go miles and miles and miles with fiber, and we have backfill our network with it. But predominantly, we are a point-to-point wireless company.
But you take these point-to-point links and build sort of an organic web out of them.
That's exactly right. It goes building to building to building, and we never know where the next building is going to come from. So back to my history as a network administrator, when I was learning how to do that, they would always give you have a campus environment, or you have 10 buildings, and you want to connect these 10 buildings, and you'd come up with these very orderly designs, like I'm going to make a ring or a star or whatever. But in our network, it's a very organic network because we never know where the next customer is going to come from. We never know where the next building is going to come from. So we're constantly re-engaging and redesigning the network to accommodate customer demand. So when you look at a picture of our network, it is very organic. It changes literally every day. We add new buildings, we remove buildings, we upgrade bandwidth to one location, we have new commercial customers coming on another location. It changes every single day. So it is a mesh, it is a ring, it is all of those things jumbled up together in this very organic, fun network to run.
And what kind of data rates do you offer your customers?
On the residential side, it's 100, 200, 500, or gig. It just depends on your building. Mm-hmm. On the commercial side, it goes from 10 megs all the way up to a gig as well.
Wow. And how many cities are you in today?
We have 5 offices. So I say 5 cities, but that's not being fair to ourselves. Mm-hmm. So we're in San Francisco, which is our home city, San Diego, Miami, Chicago, and Boston. We opened them in that order. But in San Francisco, for example, we're also in Oakland, Emeryville, Berkeley. So it's really the Bay Area that we're in, the urban Bay Area. Same thing in Miami. We're in Miami, but we spread out to other areas as well.
When we took a run at this, 15, 20 years ago, we had to buy metropolitan area spectrum licenses in order to operate, which were a very expensive gamble. Do you still have to buy spectrum today?
We don't buy citywide licenses, first and foremost, because we can't afford it. But secondly, you can get around it. Most of our links are unlicensed links, meaning we use spectrum that's reserved by the FCC for general public use. And there's lots of slices that you can use, some better than others. Because we're using very short links, as we already referred to, we can get away using high capacity, high reliability links in unlicensed spectrum. Having said that, we also license a ton of spectrum on point-to-point. So you mentioned 18 before. We operate in 18. We operate in 11. We operate in 23. Those are all fully licensed FCC bandwidth.
And you license those link by link?
Link by link. Yeah, we can't do it for the whole city.
And these millimeter wave radios are pencil beam. You can aim them at a building and pretty much put all your energy across that link?
Exactly. The beam width is what we refer to as pencil width. It's very small. The Fresnel zone is almost non-existent. As you go lower in the spectrum, if you're down at 5 gigahertz or 11 gigahertz, you have very wide Fresnel zones. A point-to-point link is shaped like a football. One radio is one tip of the football, and the other radio is the other tip of the football. And the Fresnel zone is the widest point of that football. So in traditional licensed links, the Fresnel zone can be, 100 meters wide, depending on how long you're going. Pencil width beams are exactly that. The Fresnel zone is 2 feet.
Yep.
So you can go in very urban environments. As long as you can see it, you can get full bandwidth across it. You can go between buildings. You can go through very tight alleys. You can go around obstacles.
Now, your service is building specific. How do you plan to market Webpass, given the fact that, in the early days in a city, most people who inquire about the service won't be in a building that you've already hooked up to?
Well, that's the challenge of the business, right? That is, you've hit the nail on the head with one of our most challenging things. Webpass says no a lot. We get a lot of phone calls from customers who we simply can't serve, and we have to say no, and it's frustrating. But the word of mouth is how it gets around. It's word of mouth inside of buildings. It's our reputation, and it's Google searches that lead to our business. In a building, and we operate in roughly 850 buildings nationwide, and in those buildings, our penetration rate is very, very high. And it's very high because people enjoy the quality of the service, not because they know our name when they move in. They move in, they hear about Webpass, they try us, and they never leave.
Well, we have a building manager who is very forward-looking. He's trying to make our condo one of the most desirable in the city, and he jumped on this right away. I'm very glad we had a chance to hook up.
Yeah. Having a third-party independent ISP is a great amenity to any building because it frees you from the bundle. It frees you from predatory pricing. People like it.
Yeah, it's lovely to get away from the tyranny of Comcast.
And others, but yes, I wholeheartedly agree.
Charles, I was amazed at how quick and easy it was to install Webpass here in my place. Basically, your installer came into my apartment, put a jumper in my junction box in the closet, and I plugged the Ethernet cable into the wall. I was done. Nothing changed except my bill went down and my service quality went up. I can't tell you what a nightmare it was dealing with Comcast and their cable modem. The installation, the configuration, performance issues, their awful tech support, and constantly being pimped to buy a bigger package and buy into their bundle. Is this what you're facing in every city you go into?
Yes. We get a lot of business based on spite, but we keep it based on quality. The installation is the most important event in a customer's life at Webpass, because at that moment, that's when all your questions are answered. And internally, we refer to that as the checklist of disbelief. Right? The installer has to go through the checklist of disbelief with each customer, because customers are so used to the rigmarole of tech that they don't believe it can be as easy as Webpass is. So what's on the checklist of disbelief? The technician is going to be on time, right? When you set your appointment up, it's on the hour. He's going to be there on time.
He came by the minute. I was in the bathroom. I couldn't believe it. I figured he'd come 45 minutes later.
They have to be on time. That's the first introduction to how we're going to treat our customers. The second issue is they run a speed test, because we're so used to buying something and getting something significantly less from existing technology companies. They run a speed test to show you that you're actually getting more than the advertised speed. The third item is your bill, right? It's $60 a month at Webpass, but people don't necessarily believe that. They think it's going to be $60 plus this, plus that, plus. Ours is going to be 60 is what's going to be on your invoice. Then the customer always has additional questions like, when is the rate going to go up? It's never going to go up. So they're so used to getting treated poorly by their existing internet service provider. It's an opportunity for us to differentiate ourselves and show we're just like you. Right? We want to do a fair deal with you, and as long as you like our service, we're here to provide it. But the moment that changes, you can fire us, and you can go someplace else. There's no contract, no term. We're not going to twist your arm. We want you to be our customer because you enjoy the service.
How do you escape all the crap fees that got loaded onto my cable bill and my phone bill?
Well, there's no franchise for internet, so we don't have the same regulatory environment that the video franchise or the cable franchise has. And secondly, there's no sales tax on internet service because President Bush, George W. Bush, in all his wisdom, signed that a long time ago. So it's kind of the Wild West in terms of taxes and fees. We can charge taxes and fees if we so chose to. We set it up so that we don't.
Are you worried that the new net neutrality push by the FCC is going to be used to re-regulate the internet and start loading you down with requirements and fees?
It might. I and Webpass are big net neutrality proponents, right? We believe in net neutrality. It works. It has to work if you want the network just to be a free and open place. Having said that, I believe we can do that without making onerous regulations and making it difficult for third-party ISPs to compete like ours.
You know, when you hand power to a federal agency, you can't be guaranteed how they're going to use it downstream.
That's true. That's true. But I think that the spirit of net neutrality will come through, and I think most people want free and open internet, and they want choices in internet, and that's what's missing on both sides. Most people don't have a choice in their internet provider. It's really just the cable company or the phone company, if you're lucky. So having a choice makes people satisfied. Even if they don't choose Webpass, they're happy to have the choice. And the second thing is the free and open internet, which is required to get all the new services and all the new sites and all the new things that pop up daily on the internet, which make it such a fun place.
Well, what's nice is not having it tied to my provider. I mean, I'm a Vonage customer for my phone. I'm a Netflix customer for most of my video. I use a Google Wi-Fi device in my house, which I really like. I don't want to hand all that over to one provider.
I absolutely agree with you, and that's why our customers like us, right? We sell you the internet connection. It's the best internet connection that you can buy. After that, I have nothing to sell you. I don't want to sell you a phone line. I don't want to sell you TV services. I don't want to sell you home security. I don't want to sell you online storage. I want to sell you what I can sell you better than anybody, and that's it. And then you choose, right? Let the market work. You choose what's your best video provider. You choose what's your best phone provider. You choose what services you want. You don't need them from me. It's so liberating for customers after a while because they're so used to being harangued by their telecom provider for an additional service that when they get the silence of being a Webpass customer, they love it. And 6 months or 12 months down the road, they are evangelical customers. Instead of negotiating constantly over price and term and speed and other services, they're out enjoying their lives and using the internet as they see fit. It takes them 6 months to realize that.
You know, it's funny. My mom's a widow. She's 85 years old and lives in a wonderful continuing care retirement community. And she's, of course, been captive to her cable provider. And she's, on a fixed budget. She doesn't want to buy all the packages. I bought her a Roku, and I plugged it into her TV set. And it has completely changed her television viewing habits. She's discovered Netflix. She's discovered Amazon. She's binging. She's never binged before. She's binging on Miss Fisher's murder mysteries. I mean, it's amazing how this 85-year-old woman's whole entertainment experience has changed just by cutting the cord.
Yes. And that's what's great about a free and open internet, is everyone goes through that. Everyone is alerted to all the possibilities that exist to them. And Roku is a great example because it supports so many channels, or so many apps are on there. You can get a PBS standalone one. You can get Sling, which has a great international package that you can sign up for. There's so much that you can do outside of the confines of one company. It's wonderful when people experience that.
And we solved her too many remote problems by just basically buying a Roku TV. They're building it right into the TV sets now.
Yes. Yeah.
So here's one of the challenges we've had in Boston. Some carriers have wanted to bring fiber to Boston for some time and haven't been able to because they've been held hostage by the Boston municipal government. The government's demanded universal service guarantees. They want a piece of the action, and it's pretty much kept those guys out of town. How have you escaped that kind of government extortion?
I wish I could say we have, but we haven't. That's just the nature of doing business in the internet, unfortunately. And it's not just the government, right? Landlords, REITs, institutional players, everyone thinks that the internet is just flowing with money, and if they can tap into it somehow, they'll be set for life. We have that problem with institutional investors. They won't allow Webpass into their building because they want some sort of payment or a rev share agreement or something like that. You've struck at the core of why it's so difficult to grow an internet business, is because there is no regulatory framework to follow. And Webpass is unique in that we dabble in a little of everything, right? We dabble a little bit in the telephone regulatory environment. We dabble a little bit in the video regulatory environment. We dabble a little bit in the cellular regulatory environment. And we dabble a little bit in the fiber regulatory environment, which is very difficult to dabble in, right? To be regulated by 4 different regimes is very difficult. So for us, we've promoted the Internet franchise, which is an attempt to create one regulatory structure that all Internet companies can follow. And what it boils down to is when all these regulatory regimes were created, they worked, right? The telephone franchise regime for telephone worked, and it worked for 80 years. But now nobody has landlines anymore. Cable TV, that regulatory environment that was created in the early 70s, mid-70s to allow for the cable TV growth worked. And those two companies, guess what? They're the dominant internet players now, not because they have some amazing technology or they're excellent executors. It's because they had legacy networks that they retrofitted to internet service based on those two franchise models. Then you have the cellular service regulatory environment. Cellular service is internet service. Watch any cellular company ad, and they're going to talk about data rates. They're not going to talk about voice minutes because that is an internet device now. No one refers to it as an internet device, but it's internet. And customers want to get their internet wirelessly. So we have to play in that environment. And then there's the fiber regulatory environment, which is the worst one of them all. Because the fiber regulatory environment was created back in that time that we started the interview with, during this rush to make millions. We're all going to put fiber in the ground. The internet's going to take over everything. And those companies would agree to anything. Here in San Francisco, for example, if I disturb the pavement to put in a fiber optic cable, I have to repave the entire street from corner to corner. No other company has to do that. But if you're putting fiber in the ground, you have to do that. If you're putting telephone service in, well, you can just patch that hole. If you're fixing the sewer, I can just patch that hole. But here I have to go from corner to corner. And I have to put in, many times, not always, but many times I have to put in ADA ramps on all the sidewalk corners.
Oh, no.
Right? But that was agreed to back in the late 90s when everyone thought there's going to be so much money installing fiber. If I can just get it in the ground, I will make oodles of money. Right? You won't. It's a tough business.
So cities like that are now stuck with these regulations that keep providers out?
They just make it very difficult, and they raise the cost incredibly. So the whole point of the internet franchise is, the video franchise model works very well, and the cable franchise model works very well, and that those two services were very widely deployed. So we're trying to take the good pieces of that and create a new regulatory environment for all things internet. If I want to put up an antenna to deliver internet wirelessly, I should be allowed to do that because I'm delivering internet service. If I want to put a fiber optic cable in the ground, I should be able to do that. If I need to get into a building because I'm going to provide service to a tenant, I should be able to do that.
But you're not looking for exclusive franchises the way the cable guys did.
Absolutely not. I am a huge proponent of competition, and Webpass is the result of competition. If we didn't face competition, we wouldn't be nearly as good as we are. So it must be a competitive environment.
So how can people learn more about Webpass?
Well, we're an internet company. Easiest way is to go to the website, webpass.net, right? Webpass.net, and you'll see everything about our company. If you're interested in the franchise, we definitely need public support to get the franchise passed. It's predominantly displayed on our website, and there's a change.org petition here in San Francisco to the mayor.
So, Charles, it's been 13 years now since you founded Webpass. Are you fulfilling your dream?
Well, I'm having fun. So, yes, it is a great time. I mean, I enjoy doing what I do, and every day our company's bigger. One of my stock lines is I've never run a company this big until this morning because we grow every day. So that is very satisfying. It's a great feeling to expand cities. It's a great feeling to have customers be so happy with the service and enjoy it. And at the end of the day, I think it's an experience that we should all have. We should all have an opportunity to live out our dreams and run companies or do whatever it is that makes us happy.
Charles, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story with us.
It's been my pleasure.
That was Charles Barr, president of Webpass, here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. Real Clear Radio Hour is a not-for-profit, donor-supported program produced in conjunction with Real Clear Politics, America's premier independent political website. To make sure you don't miss any of our shows, stop by realclearradio.org and sign up for updates. And while you're there, check out our archive of over 250 interviews with movers and shakers from Peter Thiel to Gary Kasparov. And if you'd like to support more thoughtful programming like this, please hit the donate button or contact us to become a corporate supporter. Today's program was partially underwritten by the generous support of Old Boston Restorations, a Victorian property management company in Boston's South End. Visit them online at oldbostonrestorations.com. Ahead, we'll speak with Brandon Johnson, CEO of Boston Microfluidics. Has his company really mastered the single-drop blood test challenge threatening to ground Silicon Valley high flyer Theranos? Stay tuned.